Nashville Public Radio serves Middle Tennessee in many ways, every day, including through this podcast. You can support it by leaving a review or rating, by telling a friend about it, or by contributing at wpln.org/give.
This is the Nashvillager Podcast. It's December 18th, 2025, and today my colleagues at WPLN's daily show This Is Nashville are doing something that has the potential to be very special. I only know their plans in the broadest sense, and yet I'm hoping strongly that this will become the first annual episode of its kind. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with context from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. As I understand it, host Blake Farmer is the one who came up with the idea for an in memoriam, This Is Nashville. And the idea is not to go through an exhaustive or high-level list of the most famous or most important community members who died in 2025. It's not about listing names for the sake of name listing, although there is certainly value in that kind of act. It's about bringing the best aspect of an audio medium to the act of remembering, which is my roundabout way of saying this is about storytelling. I pulled together a list for Blake of people WPLN has memorialized with obituaries this year, and I know he's arranged for guests who can speak about a couple of those people. But just as importantly, he's scoured the published obituaries for just normal folks around town to find ones where people took the time to include interesting details about their loved one's life. In other words, to find glimpses of the humanity of who we've lost this year. Think of the episode as a sort of group wake for any of the dead whose loved ones are interested in sharing with the rest of us. I expect that we're going to hear some interesting things about people who never ended up in the press during their lifetime, folks who were only famous to their friends and family. But goodness knows some of the most interesting characters you'll ever meet live relatively quiet lives. And the best stories of what made them interesting are the ones that get told while standing around at a funeral home. This is, of course, the time of year for remembrances of many kinds all around the community, because it's the end of the calendar year, which makes it a natural point for looking back. But also, the celebratory season is a time when we are especially aware of who isn't with us anymore. Every December, Open Table Nashville holds a service at the riverfront to remember all the unhoused people who died here in that year. Folks will gather around a bench named for Tara Cole, a woman whose killing in 2006 became emblematic of the senseless violence that folks can experience while living on the street. She was pushed into the river as she slept, and she drowned despite the efforts by other homeless people who attempted to save her. This year's service is scheduled for Saturday at 9 a.m. Everyone's names will be read. People will share memories, read poems. At the end, there's a chance to walk down to the river and place flowers on the water in honor of the people who died. Last weekend, there was a similar service to honor homicide victims. That annual event is called the Season to Remember Memorial, and it takes place in a part of Centennial Park that you may have not noticed. It's called the Children's Memory Garden, and it was set aside years ago as a place to specifically honor children who were killed by violent acts. Ahead of each year's memorial service, the families of homicide victims are invited to make ornaments, which are then hung during the ceremony. And so, although that event is past, anyone can pay their respects through the rest of the holiday season by visiting the garden and viewing the ornaments. 19 years ago, my grandfather died a few weeks before Christmas. In my grief, I didn't notice that the Christmas tree in the funeral home's lobby was covered with ceramic stars bearing names. There was one for every person whose burial or cremation they had arranged that year. At the start of the new year, we got a call that we could come and take the ornament they'd made for Grandpa if we wanted it. At the time, I didn't know how I felt about combining our mourning with the joy and beauty of holiday decorations. But I've hung that ornament on our tree every year. And as time has passed and more people have left our family, more and more of our ornaments have become tiny monuments to people that I associate with those particular baubles. I'm sure that's not a unique experience. So really, what better time is there to swap some stories about the good times and the quirks and the life that we once experienced with the people who died this year? That episode of This Is Nashville will air live on the radio at noon, and then it will be available in the This Is Nashville podcast feed. In just a few minutes, the third installment of excerpts from The Debt, which I should point out features the monumental work of one member of the Tennessee State University's community, picked up and carried on by his son years after his death. How's that for remembering a loved one? That's coming up after the newscast.
The justice system is complicated. I'm Paige Flager, and as WPLN's criminal justice reporter, I'm constantly asking, is the system working? And who is it working for?
The system is broken. I think it's more punitive than anything.
And this is not about justice anymore. This is about vengeance.
We're trying to get justice from a justice system that failed us.
How policies impact real people. Hear their stories here on WPLN News.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. The U.S. Senate signed off on the national military budget yesterday. This year's National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA, authorizes more than $900 billion. It includes several projects in and near Tennessee, such as a new air traffic control tower at Fort Campbell, as well as new modern housing for the 101st Airborne Division, funding to design a new Smyrna training site for the Army National Guard, funding for Vanderbilt and Oak Ridge to build AI modeling for the military, and continued funding for a tech research partnership between Vanderbilt and the Army called the Pathfinder program. So far, it has led to designs like an exoskeleton to help soldiers lift heavier loads. Judges in some Tennessee counties are now demanding greater transparency from people who've been court-ordered to give up their guns, following reporting from WPLN and ProPublica. Criminal justice reporter Paige Flager says the reform is spreading, despite inaction from lawmakers and a state council to require the change for all of Tennessee.
All rise. Domestic violence court is now in session. Honorable Scarlett Ellis presiding.
When I visited Scott County's domestic violence court last year, I watched as the judge had a conversation with a man about his guns.
Do you own any firearms? Are there any firearms that's been registered to you that someone else is holding for you?
He was supposed to give up his guns and had to fill out a form, a firearms dispossession affidavit. But Scott County's document has something extra. It asks for the name and the address of the person who's receiving the guns. The standard form for the rest of the state doesn't require that.
The form is really incomplete.
Becky Bullard is with Nashville's Office of Family Safety.
We can't have someone dispossess of their firearm lawfully if we don't know who they're giving the gun to.
Republican lawmakers introduced a bill to change the state form after our reporting. But there was opposition from the NRA, and it didn't make it into law. Then, more recently, a state council failed to bring the matter to a vote. In the meantime, some judges are taking matters into their own hands.
When I heard about what Scott County was doing, I was shocked.
Shelby County Judge Greg Gilbert is one of at least 10 judges in counties around Tennessee that are requiring this extra transparency.
It does make it a little more likely that people will take this seriously.
It's a small change that could have a big impact, Bullard says.
We really do not have a minute to lose, and this is a battle that we have been fighting around a form for years, and it could affect someone in the next minute.
Our investigations have found that roughly 1 in 4 shooting victims in domestic violence homicides were killed by someone who never should have had access to a gun. Paige Flager, WPLN News.
Governor Bill Lee is now echoing the state House Speaker's call to end the income limits on a program that piloted school vouchers in Tennessee. This is a program that is limited to students in Davidson, Shelby, and Hamilton counties. It offers families more public money for private education than the universal statewide voucher program that launched this year, and it is currently only available to students in low-income families. The Tennessean reports Governor Lee wants to get rid of that income cap. He says it will still be accessible to poor families. Lee's also said he'd like to double the number of available vouchers in the state. Currently, the statewide program offers 20,000 vouchers. It received 42,000 applications from interested families. Once again, Nashville's Metro Council has deferred consideration of a contentious agreement that would oversee the use of a $15 million grant meant for public safety downtown. Mayor Freddie O'Connell tells our midday show, This Is Nashville, that the money is supposed to go towards things requested by downtown businesses.
We wanted to have a balanced approach of things that we have not had downtown that people have long asked for, including downtown restrooms, upgrades in lighting, those kinds of things. And then replacement scenarios like cameras. This is absolutely not an effort to backdoor in other things. This is one-time state available money that we tried to build guardrails around so we could partner with the Downtown Partnership.
The Downtown Partnership is the quasi-governmental agency that patrols Lower Broadway. The agreement includes new surveillance cameras and software. Following a prolonged debate Tuesday night, the council deferred consideration of the bill until their January meeting. That's after the council had already deferred the bill earlier this month. Meanwhile, members of Nashville's Metro Council have put forth a resolution opposing the Boring Company's tunnel project. The tunnel will be constructed by the Elon Musk-owned company and will connect the airport and downtown. Also operating there will be a fleet of Teslas used for a rideshare service. The proposed resolution condemns the company's lack of transparency, labor and safety practices, and community engagement. During the meeting's public comment period, the chair of the Mayor's Advisory Council for People with Disabilities added her concern related to accessibility. Here's Lindsay Lee.
Though almost no information has been made available about the accessibility plans for the tunnel, we can easily infer that there will be no accessible vehicles that someone like me who depends on a wheelchair could use, because as of today, they don't make wheelchair accessible Teslas. Even if a wheelchair user is able to transfer to a vehicle, based on the tunnel dimensions that have already been reported, it's clear it would not be possible for the wheelchair user to safely exit the vehicle in an emergency.
Lee added that the Mayor's Advisory Council had sent Boring a letter inquiring about accessibility. So far, there's been no response. Ultimately, Metro Council deferred consideration of the resolution until their meeting next month. Over the past 2 years, Tennessee has pulled in nearly $90 million in opioid settlement funding for towns and counties. But the Tennessean reports the state has struggled to track how local governments are spending that money. The towns and counties have spent about half of it overall, but many individual counties haven't spent any. The reporting process has been so difficult, the state scrapped it and started over, so now we know even less. Officials for the Opioid Abatement Council, which oversees and distributes a lot of the funds coming in, said it's not the fault of local governments, who just need a better reporting system and more education on using the money properly. Although statewide death rates have decreased some in recent years, overall use and addiction rates are still high, underscoring the need for better access to treatment. A member of Wilson County's school board was arrested this week. Lebanon police confirmed that Donnie Self turned himself in to comply with warrants that accuse him of 2 counts of indecent exposure. According to WKRN, the arrest affidavit states that a man, later identified as Self, exposed himself to an employee at a fast food restaurant. The police also confirmed this is not the first time this has occurred. Self was released on bond. A representative of the school board says they are aware of the charges but will not be making any comments at this time. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. Conversations about how much the state underfunded its only public HBCU, Tennessee State University, ramped up in the last few years. Much of this is credited to State Representative and TSU alum Harold Love Jr. He says that a report made by his father, also a lawmaker, nearly 50 years ago, is the true reason behind TSU getting more funding. Reporters Emily Seiner and Camelia Burris tell this history with our new special called The Debt. Here's an excerpt.
But even with his research, he's having trouble getting his colleagues on board.
And so the disconnect was, I'm saying, no, TSU's been underfunded. But to throw that broadly out there, like, well, what do you mean underfunded? Like, you didn't get what you asked for last year? No, for the last 30 years. Well, what do you mean?
And they're brushing him off because he's young and they have other priorities. He's this junior lawmaker. They're not taking him that seriously.
And I'm frustrated. And I'm at my house, right? I think I started going through my boxes of stuff that I brought from my father's office.
Then he hears a voice.
Read the report.
Representative Love is a man of faith, a pastor who leads a church in North Nashville. It's actually the church that I grew up in. He says his faith has always guided his decisions. And so he pulls out the report that he brought from his father's office, the one about financial needs of Negro colleges.
And when I read it, I said, wow, this is exactly what I needed.
So the 1970 legislative report said that year, TSU had only received $51,600 of the $4.5 million in federal land grant funds given to Tennessee. It was proof that Harold Love Jr. was not making it up. The legislature itself had been talking about this almost 50 years earlier.
I could then make the case that Tennessee State University had not been getting its funding. And there was research done in the 1970s that spoke to this. And here we still are at this present age.
He holds up his father's report on the floor of the Tennessee House in 2016.
To renew this motion, discussion on the bill. Representative Love.
I asked the Speaker if I could address the bill sponsor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, Tennessee State University is our second land grant in this state. It had to be formed because students of color weren't allowed to go to UT. Now, each land grant gets money from the federal government.
And I started reading from the report.
As I was looking through my father's old notes, I found a report from 1970 called The Special Financial Needs of Negro Universities.
I can only imagine how Representative Love must feel to really be able to do that and take the baton from his father and to give his father the credit that he probably didn't get, when I can only imagine what it was like for a black lawmaker in Tennessee to try to get things through.
It allowed me to say the discovery that I made was made almost 50 years ago.
In 1970, Tennessee State was getting 1% of the land grant dollars from the state of Tennessee.
And so as I start reading the report, the chair of education comes over and says, "We got it. We understand, and we're gonna fix it."
Emily Siner and Camelia Burris are co-producers of The Debt, about the fight for fair funding at TSU. Find the whole story at WPLN.org/thedebt. We do this roundup of Nashville news every weekday. Please consider subscribing on your favorite podcasting app. Thanks so much to all of you who've left 5 stars, a thumbs up, or a review in your app of choice. That little bit of love really does tell the algorithms that more people should hear about us. And of course, everything at WPLN News is listener supported. You can make a donation at WPLN.org. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one. And we'll catch back up tomorrow.